Okay, welcome to Beyond the Dead of Night, The Return, where we get to chat with Carl, the mastermind behind this atmospheric and haunting band. After an 8-year hiatus, they're back with a brand new album. Carl, it's such a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. In fact, it's a pleasure to be anywhere at 60. So you know, we're already onto a winner.
I love that spirit. Well, let's dive right in and give our listeners a little taste of who you are. Who exactly are Beyond the Dead of Night, and how would you describe your sound to someone who's never heard it before?
Beyond the Dead of Night are currently three. There's myself, Carl Eden. I'm the songwriter, keyboard player. Do the I produce and mix. And then we have Bryony Roberts, who is the singer, fantastic voice that she has, and our very accomplished guitarist Dan Roberts. And you may notice the similarity in last names between the two. Because they met pretty much through the band and are now married and have a lovely daughter of their own.
That is such a wonderful story. It sounds like the band really is a family in more ways than one. I'm sure that connection adds a special layer to the music as well.
It does, and that's really what the music's all about. It's about connection, it's about time, it's about our place in things. And to answer your previous question, we started life as a symphonic metal album, and I don't really know what we are anymore. We go down the symphonic metal route in terms of how we mix songs, but the songs seem these days to not quite contain the heaviness, more like rock or synth rock. I mean, I don't know what shelf you would put us on, actually, which is probably a huge problem. The music business mainly being business rather than music.
I think that genre blending is what makes music so interesting, though. And, you know, it sounds like Beyond the Dead of Night has evolved naturally over time, and that evolution definitely keeps things fresh and exciting for your listeners.
It does. We're always trying to move forward, and I think in terms of songwriting, I tend to go with what I feel like I'm given. It's very difficult to write something against what I feel almost programmed to write, if you like. And when I'm not having my very frequent bouts of writer's block, I don't really know where the songs come from, where the ideas come from. And very often at the end of a writing session, or having finished a recording, I'll look back on the song and think, well, where did that come from? Because I don't even know what's going on in that song. It's almost as if some creative force takes over, if that doesn't sound too pompous, which of course it does.
No, not at all. I think a lot of artists can relate to that feeling of tapping into something almost beyond themselves when they're creating. It's like the music has a life of its own and you're just the vessel bringing it into the world. It definitely makes for some magical and unexpected moments.
It does, and it's very much like that. And it's a shame that my default writing mode is to be blocked. So I spend most of my time not writing music, staring at blank screens, or just researching ideas, reading through things, just waiting for the idea to strike, really. But it's been a long 8 years waiting for that to happen.
All right. So even though those creative blocks can feel challenging, it really sounds like the time you've taken has only deepened your connection to the music and to the band. It's really inspiring to see how you've navigated that journey and come out on the other side with something really meaningful to share.
Well, after our third album, we released 3 albums in reasonably quick succession. From around about 2016, we did one a year. We did The Dead Shall Rise Again, which was a re-recording of our first album, but with our current lineup, which lineup disintegrated pretty sharpish after our first gig, and so I just decided to start again, frankly, with the same songs, and I just remixed the whole album, new vocalist, and then we moved on to the second album, which was In Search of Ancient Magic in 2017, which is my favourite album, actually. And then The Evolving Science of Self, which was released to almost no acclaim whatsoever on Pride and Joy Music, a German record label. We got some great reviews of that actually, but generally speaking, we weren't heavy enough, and that's really been one of my bugbears really. When we're not heavy enough to be proper heavy metal, but we're too heavy to be rock really. I don't know. I'm just making the whole thing up as I go along. So I don't know. What happened in 2018 though was that it just wasn't a nice experience. I mean, Pride and Joy were very nice, and certainly weren't a problem. But the idea of working to a deadline, I just found really, really difficult. And by the last few songs, they just didn't seem to have. They just weren't what I wanted them to be, and the whole album wasn't really what I wanted it to be. There are some good individual songs on there, but as a whole, it doesn't feel like it hangs together as well as the first two. So, and that's something I wanted to address in the third. But regarding the third, we split up to all intents and purposes in 2018, and then around 2020-ish, I think just after COVID, I wrote a couple of songs. I tried to write a couple of songs, and I think that might have been the problem. I was trying a little bit too hard. And we put a couple of MP3s out there, nothing spectacular. And I just didn't feel like anything was sitting right or fitting together. So after that, I just kind of left it and thought, well, it will find me if I'm destined to write any more. Best not to push it, it will find me. And that's where we've been now since about 2020. So 5 years later, Dan got in touch. And, would you like to make an album? And he knows how I feel about gigging to 5 people. I'm not the biggest fan of carrying gear around anymore. I've done it for years. And so he said, well, do you want to just make a bedroom album then? We'll make an album for the fun of it. And I thought, well, that sounds good. And then I sat on that for a few weeks. And then suddenly the songs just started to come one after the other, over and over. And within about the space of 4 weeks, I'd written and recorded demos of 8 of the tracks from the new album. So there's something going in the right direction, whatever that direction is.
That definitely sounds like things have fallen into place in a really organic way, and it's amazing how that creative spark can come back when you least expect it. It sounds like this new album's really going to capture that energy and inspiration, and I'm sure your fans are going to be excited to hear it.
I hope the fans are excited to hear it. I suppose stylistically it harks back to more of an In Search of Ancient Magic type of time. This is the album I would rather have written after Ancient Magic, I suppose, really. And I try to pick up there, but as I said, I really just get what I'm given. So it's just a case of having to write what I get and hang the consequences, as it were. But I hope people are excited to hear some new music. I'm absolutely excited for the first time in 8 years to actually be producing music. So that's, that for me personally, it just feels good to be doing this.
Absolutely, and that excitement really shines through. It's amazing that you're reconnecting with that creative energy and bringing it into this new album. I'm sure your fans are going to be thrilled to hear what you've been working on and to see how your sound has evolved after all this time.
Yeah, it's difficult to hear what the finished songs are going to sound like. So far, I've got to the point where I've recorded 8 demos, and of course a demo is just me and my setup. So any guitars on there are me playing a keyboard version of a guitar. Any vocals on there are just an AI vocal plugin just to help me place the vocals in the mix at this early stage, if you like, and try to visualize what it's going to sound like. Back in the day, last time we recorded anything, I used to record demo versions of the vocals, and my vocal, my singing is just it's not the best, if you like. And also, I've been male, I sing an octave lower than Bryony does. So I never really had an idea of what the song was going to sound like or how the arrangement was going to go. But now using AI to actually demo the vocal, I can place that. I can get the arrangement pretty accurate, even before we start to record vocals and guitars.
That's such a great use of technology, and it must be a game changer for visualizing the final sound. You know, it really allows you to fine tune everything and get a much clearer picture of how the songs will come together even before the rest of the band steps in. It's amazing how far things have come. So, thinking about this new album, what would you say are some of the core themes or emotions that are running through these new songs?
So yeah, all my albums tend to have some sort of core theme going on, even if they're not concept albums. There's something going through my head. Whether I can pin it down or not is another matter, but there's usually some kind of idea. So with Ancient Magic, it was more to do with spirituality, knowing your place in the universe, understanding that there's a plan. And with this album, it's more to do with the idea of time passing, things moving on. Sometimes you don't realise they're moving on, but this idea of nostalgia for times past, which I touched on in Heareth on Ancient Magic, but I think there's more. I explore it in much more detail in this album. And you can kind of exemplify that in some of the tracks. There's a track on there called What Becomes of Our Children's Children. And that's really all about the idea that I just got thinking one day, well, you know what? I've got a granddaughter now who's just been born. She's almost 1. If I make it to 80, she's only going to be 20. And I'm never going to see the end of that story. I'm never going to know how that story finishes. And I was a little bit sad about that. But, time moves on. And I wanted to kind of encapsulate this idea that we've got to just let go sometimes, and things will move on without us at some point. And that probably sums up what the whole album is about. The march of time, that kind of melancholy, back in the day kind of thing that I'm always scratching at. I just get to do more scratching. And of course, this thing that I have about the sea, which I don't know what that is, but a lot of songs seem to be based around sea imagery, and I'm always obsessed with the sea, and I love boats, and I can't swim for nuts. I'd be really useless, if in a capsizing crisis. But there is something that absolutely drags me towards the sea. It's kicking and screaming, but I don't know what that is. What I do know, though, is that central to everything I write is the relationship that I have with Isabel, my wife. And more than that, my soulmate, the person I feel like I've spent many lifetimes with. And we just kind of fit together like this pair of gloves, these Lego bricks, that it just feels completely right, and that becomes the center of all my writing. That it centers the spiritual, it centers the emotional, and of course when I'm writing stuff, I've always got us two in mind. I always picture that, and that's why I think a lot of what I write is very emotional, very immediate, and very spiritual.
That connection to the sea definitely adds a beautiful layer of imagery to your music, and it sounds like it ties in perfectly with those themes of time and nostalgia. And it's amazing how these inspirations just find their way into your songwriting, even if you can't always pinpoint where they come from. And it definitely adds a lot of depth and richness to your work.
I actually love that I can't pinpoint where a lot of this stuff comes from, because it allows you then to kind of sit back and look at it in the third person, and examine your own. It's almost like you sat on the psychiatrist's chair, and you're able to examine your own psyche and how you feel about things. And a big part of this album came from the fact that I hit 60 at the end of last year. I'm the last of the boomers, so I hit 60 at the end of last year, and it hasn't really affected me because I still feel about 30. But psychologically, you kind of think, well, there is an end in sight now, and it might be 30 years away. You don't know. My mum's still alive. She's 94. My dad died at 85. So I'm not suggesting that I'm going to be disappearing anytime soon. But when you get more than halfway there, you then start to just stand back and just look at your place in things and start to try to assess what you've done so far, how you've affected people so far. And I think that can be a very powerful tool for self-analysis.
Absolutely. And it sounds like that self-reflection really adds a lot of depth to your music and your lyrics. It's amazing how those big milestones in life can give us a new perspective and really influence the art we create. It's definitely powerful and something that I think a lot of people can relate to. Shifting gears a bit, I'd love to know more about your creative process when you're actually in the zone. Do you usually start with a melody, or do you find yourself focusing on lyrics first? How does that usually unfold?
So a song can come any way at all. It can come from a little snippet. I can be tinkling around on my piano or on my keyboard and just get a little idea for a little snippet of music. Or sometimes I have a title that just pops into my mind, or I read. Child of Wolves, for example, from Ancient Magic, came about because I was scrolling Facebook, or I think it might have actually been Twitter back in the day, and I was reading through posts, and one of the names of the people who posted was Child of Wolves. And for some reason that just jumped out at me, and I thought, oh, that's good. And from that, it was very interesting. And from that, all the imagery, that cold, frosty imagery of the north came about, and the idea of death as a cycle. It all just came from looking at that one little name at the bottom of the post. So it's amazing where ideas can come from, but I don't have a set way of sitting down and just starting a piece of music. Very often it will take me by surprise, or I'll be doing something completely non-musical and it will pop into my head, or as I say, I'll read something, or there'll be just a little tune, or a little phrase will pop up.
It's really fascinating how inspiration can strike from the most unexpected places. It just shows how creativity is always bubbling under the surface, ready to pop out when you least expect it. It must make the songwriting process feel like a bit of an adventure each time.
Yeah, adventure that you don't even know you're getting into, really, because you're just minding your own business, and suddenly you're swept away, and before you know it, 4 hours have passed and you don't know where they've gone. And that phrase, "in the zone," which I really like that phrase, "in the zone." I'm in the zone. I used it in Michael Faraday on Ancient Magic. Just this juxtaposition of a Victorian scientist and then the phrase "in the zone," I just thought was great. But I love that idea of being in the zone where you're almost outside yourself, or really sort of inside yourself, just not even self-narrating. It's thought at its purest, in its purest sense, where you don't even realise you're thinking. And I'm sure lots of people will experience that kind of thing, whether they're doing hobbies or creating things, where the hours pass and you realise you haven't thought about yourself for a long time.
Absolutely. That feeling of being in the zone is such a magical state where time just seems to disappear and you're completely immersed in what you're doing. It really does allow for that pure creativity to flow. And I think that's when some of the most genuine and inspired work comes out. It's definitely a special place to be. All right, let's dive into another one. You mentioned earlier that this new album is something you wish you could have written right after Ancient Magic. How do you feel your songwriting or your approach to music has evolved from that period to now?
It's difficult to talk about evolution when you don't feel in control of what you're writing that much. I think a lot of ideas have crystallized in my head, and I think a lot of what I was trying to say in The Evolving Science of Self, I've managed to say a lot more successfully in the new album. But in terms of how things have progressed, I think writing-wise, I write the same way. I've always written the same way because I don't know how not to. So, and in terms of style, I don't choose. I mean, I've learned at university to do pastiche and to copy other composers, and I can knock out a bit of Bach or Mozart or whatever, or maybe write a poor song in the style of Buddy Holly or something like that. But writing your own stuff, I don't think you get a choice. You don't. I don't think you get a choice in how to do it. I think that the method chooses you, if you like, and then you just have to follow that. And so I don't think, in terms of my songwriting, it's evolved. Maybe the sound has evolved slightly. And again, I won't know that until I'll listen to the final version of the album where Bryony and Dan have added their magic. Because at present with the demos, it's just sound pretty sterile, obviously just with keyboards. And I rely on the other two really to bring a bit of humanity to the thing, if you like.
That makes perfect sense. It's like the creative process has its own flow, and you just follow where it leads. And it's wonderful that you're able to trust that process and let Bryony and Dan bring their own magic to the final sound. It really makes the whole process a beautiful collaboration. Let's talk a little bit about the recording process for this new album. Since you all work remotely, how do you keep that creative spark and collaboration knowing and you're not physically in the same room?
We do work remotely. I don't think we're unique these days by any means in being a band that never actually sits down in the same room. I mean, I'm in one part of the UK, they're both in another part of the UK. We've all got busy lives and everybody works. I'm a piano teacher, they've got their own things to do. So it's difficult to get us all together. So what we do is when I'll record the demos and I'll send various versions of the demo off to them. So I'll normally start with guitars rather than start with vocals. So I would send Dan a mix that has none of my weedy keyboard guitar playing on it, to allow him a little bit of space to express himself. You know, I don't want an album it's not a solo album. So, you know, that creative input where Dan is kind of doing his own thing, I think is absolutely vital to the sound that we get. So I send him this version, and I'll send him the version with my guitars turned up a little bit too, so he can kind of take what he wants from that and chuck away what he wants from that. And he'll record his guitars and we'll do various versions of that and then send them back to me. I drop them in the mix, and it's really then my job to as working as my own engineer to make them sit nicely in the mix, which they do. Quite easily, ridiculously easily sometimes. It can be minutes of a job. Just putting the guitar parts on the track, but it really does change the overall feel. And so when I've got that, what I will do is I'll send a new mix with those guitars without vocals back, and then Bryony can start to work on her vocals. Lyric sheet, obviously, that she gets, and then she can just kind of do her thing and record the vocals that. And, you know, very often I'll send her, she'll listen to the tune and then she will just diverge from that a little bit. And that they are always the magical moments in the music, the bits where, you know, Bryony or Dan even just diverges from what I've actually written and puts something of themselves in there. And that's what I mean with AI sounds quite clinical when you do that. But when you have real people, then in the moment there are some just wonderful things. The piece takes on a life of its own, and it becomes more than the sum of its parts. I'm always excited to get the vocals on and to see for the first time what the overall sound is going to be like.
That sounds like such a magical process, and it really shows how each of you brings your own unique touch to the music. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. I'm curious, is there a particular track on the new album that you're especially excited for listeners to hear? And if so, what makes that track stand out to you?
Yeah, well, at this point, I feel very, very close to the whole thing. And it's very hard to step back and take a look at the whole album so far. But, you know, obviously I like the songs. Otherwise, I wouldn't be writing them. I don't think it's big-headed to say that the song... For me, the songs are really good. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to put them out there. But in terms of favourites, I mean, I've got a working title for the album at present, which is based on what I think is going to be the first track on the album, the title track, which is From the Oceans to the Stars. Which again, you've got the sea in there, of course, but it's more expansive. So, in terms of my favourites at present, I think What Becomes of Our Children's Children is one that certainly tugs at my heartstrings. And this is going to sound weird, but sometimes I'll write something and I'll burst into tears and think, oh my God, that is such a melancholy revelation. And there was a moment when I was writing What Becomes of Our Children's Children, and I was writing the middle 8. Middle 8 very often becomes a middle 12, middle 16, middle 32. But I was writing the middle 8, and I just looked back at the lyrics, and I thought, oh, that is so not sad, but wistful and melancholy. And I just had a little, moment. Which has also happened on the other side of the rain on Ancient Magic as well. I remember doing the demo to that and listening to the lyrics back. And the problem is that it's not a problem, but when I'm writing stuff, I've always got, in terms of relationships, it's always me, it's my wife, Isabel. There's always that at the centre of everything I write. So I'm picturing things really, really strongly. And it's that brings the emotion to the music. But yeah, in What Becomes of Our Children's Children is one of my favourites. But there's also another on the album called Sea Shanties, which is based on the idea. When I was a kid, when I was in music, we used to sing sea shanties a lot. And a few weeks ago, I went to see a choir and they did a medley of sea shanties, and I was instantly transported back to those days when I was about 6 or 7 or 8 or whenever, and we were singing, What Shall We Do with the Drunken Sailor, and all those kind of songs from the seas that you do as a kid. And it just brought back a lot of memories for me doing that. And of course, then my ancient brain then starts to turn that around and churn away at it until it becomes something a little bit more melancholy and wistful than just happy memories about looking at your childhood. But musically, it's a sea shanty, and it's almost like pirate metal, and I've always wanted to kind of try. I never thought I would, but you get what you're given, and it's like almost like a pirate metal type of song. And although the message is quite not bleak, but it has that wistful melancholy in there that I can't seem to drag myself out of. It's really buoyant and bouncy and bubbly, and a rollicking kind of sing-along. So from that point of view, I really like that one.
It sounds like you have such a wonderful range of emotions and stories woven into the album, and each track really brings something unique. It's amazing how music can take us on such a nostalgic journey and also bring something new and fresh at the same time. I'm sure listeners are going to love that mix of energy and emotion throughout the album. All right, let's dive into something a little different. What do you hope listeners will take away from this new album when they listen to it for the first time?
I just hope that they're going to enjoy it, that they're going to enjoy the songs, they're going to enjoy the tunes. It's all about the tunes for me, never could quite get into rap, even though I can appreciate some good rap. I could never listen to more than a couple of tracks because I'm a tunes kind of guy and I want tunes. And I think the melody is everything. So, I hope they're going to get a few earworms for a start. I hope they're going to maybe dig into the lyrics a bit and take something away, which maybe makes them think a little bit about their place in the universe and their lives so far. But really, I just want people to enjoy it on a basic level. I don't really care. These days, at 60, I don't really care. I'm not looking for fame or fortune. This is something I had to write, and I hope people want to listen to it. But if they don't, then I'll listen to it in the car, on my headphones, So, it's always going to have at least one listener, and probably three with Brownie and Dan. I know they really like the stuff we do, obviously, as well. But yeah, other than that, anybody else is a bonus, frankly.
I love that perspective. It really shows that this album comes from such a genuine place of creativity and passion. And I have no doubt that listeners are going to connect with those melodies and those lyrics. It's all about sharing something meaningful, and it sounds like you've done just that. All right, let's dive into another one. I'm curious, since this album has been such a journey for you, do you have any plans or hopes for live performances in the future, or are you going to keep focusing on the recording and remote collaboration side of things?
Live performances. When Dan brought this up to me, he knew how to do it. He said, we don't have to tour, we don't have to do any live performances, we could make a bedroom album. So that obviously means there will be live performances in the future. It probably just not with me in them. Bryony and Dan are great performers, and they perform now as Silence Surrounds Me, and they do the occasional Dead of Night track. But I don't think now it's something I particularly want to do. I think maybe 30, 40 years ago, I'd have been very excited to put a live band together and get on the road and just go through all that pain, but not really for me anymore. But never say never. I don't know, and they do say you while you're busy making plans, then life's happening around you. So who knows what's going to happen in the future?
You never know what the future holds, right? In any case, it sounds like you've created something really special with this album, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people. It's been so great hearing about your creative process and everything that's gone into it.
Thanks very much.
Well, that wraps up our chat with Carl from Beyond the Dead of Night. Keep an eye out for their upcoming album, From the Ocean to the Stars, which will be available towards the end of this year. And for all the latest updates, make sure to follow their Facebook page, Beyond the Dead of Night. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.